Hello, and welcome to the Book of Heroes podcast. This is a weekly show dedicated to helping you get better at Storybook Brawl. I'm your host, Sydney, and today we're welcoming a special guest, the winner of the Storybook Brawl Spring Championships, Erin Gertler. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, super excited to have you as well. So just to give you a bit of an introduction, I've actually been a fan of Erin here for a while because I first heard about him as a Magic player. I think, would you say you're best known for pioneering the Teamer Adventures deck in Magic?
Yeah, that's the one where, if all my stream fans had to make my tombstone, they'd put a lucky clover on it to symbolize that deck. I guess to me, they're all my special babies, but Teamer Clover is the special baby that made me a lot of money.
Fair enough, yeah. For non-Magic fans, this was the best deck you could build for, I would say, maybe a year or more.
A few months, but, it was very competitive for a year or so, and they only really put it down when they had to ban a few cards after a teammate of mine and I both, placed first and second in the 2020 World Championship, effectively playing the same deck built around the same structure.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty impressive. You pioneered a deck that directly led to some bannings because it was too good.
There are a lot of people from that era of Magic who could say the same thing because they banned a lot of cards, but it is, both pleasing and it was sad to see it die, but it had overstayed its welcome at that point.
Yeah, fair enough. But, as I mentioned, you're also the Spring Champion. Last March, you came in first in the biggest tournament we've had in Storybook Brawl so far, I think.
Yeah, after an absolutely miraculous final game where the person who is sort of in the lead overall points-wise managed to get 2 of my units to 1 health in a, very late stage level 6 fight where that sort of thing usually doesn't happen. Missed slaying with an upgraded Siren by 1, and that was what probably decided the entire match.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. And I think you're being very humble and attributing your success to luck.
Well, that specific piece of success.
Fair enough.
All the other, my placements were fought fair and square, and just recognizing that it could be very easily be May could be the person you're talking to right now, if things had swung just a little differently. But I would put myself up there with all the strongest competitors in the game at the moment. I think there's a lot of people who are all, kind of going to be neck and neck. You could probably run that tournament 10 times and you'd get 7 or 8 different winners.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, you're the one I'm talking to.
It's true.
Yeah, so I think the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how did you get into Storybook Brawl? I assume you heard about it through Magic?
Yeah, I'm normally a one video game kind of guy. Magic alone takes up so much time to be good at and follow and keep track of that I play surprisingly few other games for somebody who, is a professional video game player. Really, it's just Magic most of the time. But I did happen to see that there were like 5 different people on Twitter who are all Magic pros who are all talking about this new game. And I think it was just after the 5th one, I'm like, what is this? I will check this out. It's very rare for me to see so much buzz for something so early on. And I played a few matches, and it was very different than anything I played before. I have no experience with like auto chess type games, Hearthstone Battlegrounds, none of that. And so it was just a very different puzzle than Magic to wrap my head around. But I think that was good, because I think I've often been bouncing back and forth between the two games. Whenever I get tired of Magic, Storybook Brawl is there and is a very different experience. And then, when a new Magic set comes out, I'll bounce right back to that.
Yeah, those are the 2 major video games I play as well. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. So then I'd also like to hear a little bit about your experience in the Spring Championships. You talked a bit about that, and I will say you wrote a great tournament report, and there's also some videos out there. I'll link to those in the show notes. But I'm curious, what was your take on that tournament? Maybe just give our listeners a bit of the story of how you got there, or how you won.
Yeah, so I am reading my own tournament report right now as I talk to you, because that is where I shoved all the memories. It just felt like, tournament play, for anyone who's ever gone from playing ladder to jumping into their first tournament, I'm sure you've all felt how different it is to play, in matches where everybody is just kind of on their game, and you're just facing much stronger boards on average much earlier than you would be otherwise. And the Spring Championship definitely is an extension of that. It's the strongest tournament they've run so far, and definitely felt the heat of competition. But I think I just tried to play normally. I didn't really change up my strategy that much. I think it helped that I was doing a lot of focused practice ahead of time. There's an idea when it comes to sports and just kind of strategic endeavors generally, that there's this difference between playing around and doing deliberate practice. And I think that's a really important thing for, me as I've grown into a tournament player in multiple games is to recognize the difference between I'm kind of playing around, I'll make a decision because it's the fun thing to do versus like, okay, let's pretend this is a tournament. What exactly am I going to do every round if I assume that, I'm going to have to run into like Redrame and May and SirSalty and people like that every round. That means there's kind of not a lot of room to mess around, and it just helps to have that mindset. And I think practicing enough with that mindset prepared me really well for the Spring Championships. Yeah, I just kind of have a lot of units I like and some comps I like and managed to most of the time make my way over there. With the exception of Slay. I tried Slay a bunch of times and just kept missing. And yeah, I think in general I'm more down on Slay in a tournament setting unless you're being led directly to it. It just feels like it's much harder to kill units when you're up against good players. Anyway, that's a digression. Where was I? Spring Championship, sorry. I just played a bunch of games of Storybook Brawl and they went pretty well. I think I had a couple of games where I got really lucky at the right moments. There was a Peter Pants game where I was about to die and then sort of just had my first hat ball turn. I managed to get an upgraded Hercules out of nowhere, and then that turned to a Wand of Weirding, which kind of turned around the game completely for a position where I was almost dead. So a couple of games like that, and I was able to push through the top 8. And then the top 8, I had a bunch of kind of medium games in a row, and then I think 5 players all hit the threshold where if one of us won the next round, we were all going to be there. And I think I was probably in 5th place of those 5 players, but I won the next round, and that's all there was to it. It's kind of how the tournament structure is.
Yeah, there's a lot of follow-up questions I want to ask about that. I think one that I think would be beneficial for a lot of our listeners is the idea of focused practice. What things do you do specifically that are different when you're playing to practice the game and maybe learn specific skills rather than just playing for fun?
Yeah, so some things I will do when I'm doing deliberate practice is I will, instead of taking my favorite hero, normally if I see Catter, I'll just grab Catter or Potion Master all the time because I love playing those specific heroes. But if I'm in focused practice mode, then I might instead take, all right, well, there's a Catter's here, but also Piper's here, and I know Piper's just stronger, so I'm just going to take Piper and play a boring Piper game and really try to focus on, like, okay, let's maximize my skill with, like, converting Piper into wins. Or I might say, okay, there's like a Pup the Magic Dragon here, and Pup the Magic Dragon is a hero I will almost never pick, but it's like, one of those heroes where notoriously if you have a shop full of horrible heroes, maybe Pup is actually the best one. Like, it's a hero I might actually have to play in a tournament at some point. So let's get some practice with Pup and see what I can learn about doing that. So it's sort of like trying to either accentuate my strengths, like how do I get really good at the best heroes in the game, the ones I'm going to be playing most often, or how do I get a little bit of practice in so I'm not just completely dead if I end up having a poor choice of heroes. And that's one way to think about it. And then I'm also just more likely to similarly kind of go for these conventional comps and sort of practice playing the right way rather than playing like the fun way where I'm just, memeing a little bit more if I'm on ladder.
Okay, so when you're deliberately practicing, you're choosing what you perceive to be the more competitive options rather than the options you most enjoy, and you're forcing yourself to go outside a bit of your comfort zone?
Yeah, usually it's the most competitive options, but sometimes it's practicing with, okay, I know there is going to come a time when I have to play a hero like Pup, or I have to play a hero like, I don't know, APOC. Let's get some practice in because these heroes have like fairly distinct play styles or whatever. I need to kind of get some experience in looking carefully at how unit values differ when I'm playing a hero I'm not used to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you ever do like skills-focused practice? I don't know quite how to describe this, but like focusing on, I'm just going to try and assemble this one particular comp and do it particularly well, or I'm going to focus on like, I don't know, making the right role decisions.
Yeah, I would say I don't normally practice forcing comps, I guess. The only time I can ever remember Storybook Brawl feeling like you had to force a certain comp to win was probably Pumpkin King on level 5 was a pretty bad time. I didn't play much during that period for that exact reason, because I just don't like, my favorite kinds of games are the ones where I'm navigating a slightly different path every time I go in instead of trying to do the same thing over and over again. But I will be there's a difference between I'm going to play the thing that seems most fun or the thing that seems like it'll be the coolest if it works versus I'm going to play the thing that I think is going to get me the highest average placement in a game. And that's not just about avoiding memes and kind of avoiding losing value just for fun. It also means deciding, okay, this is the kind of game where I recognize I can win this lobby. I can afford to be weak for a couple turns because I don't think that these, the random players on ladder are going to punish me enough. But if I tried to pull this shit against like Redrame and May, I'm going to die. So I'm going to pretend that I'm playing against Redrame and May, and I'm going to take the conservative line that makes me like strongest this turn, even if it has less payoff later, and play as though, I'm at risk of dying at any point.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So actually, that's maybe a good segue. You mentioned trying to figure out not just what's the most fun, but what gives you the best lines, what maybe defends your health the best in a given situation. What's your practice for reading the metagame? When you say, I know this thing is the best thing to do as opposed to the fun thing to do, like, how do you figure that out?
Well, unfortunately, it doesn't change that much. I mean, it hasn't changed that much in the last patch or two, just because there haven't been really dramatic hero changes. Whenever there is a new hero, I will try, I'll go out of my way to play that hero. Like when I think Pan's Shadow was the last hero to really see a major change. And when the new Pan's Shadow came out, I'm like, wow, this seems like it could be really good. I'm going to try playing some Pan's Shadow. And I quickly realized, wow, Pan's Shadow kind of sucks. Forget this. But, I at least took the time to try it. And I also took the time to watch, there are a lot of Storybook Brawl streamers I follow. And if I'm really trying to get a sense for like how a certain hero is supposed to work, sometimes I'll go fast forward through a bunch of, Trynet streams, Redrame streams, Icarus streams, people like that, and see, okay, can I find them playing this hero that I'm curious about? Or do I see them with some kind of final board where I'm like, how would you get to that final board? How would you build that? And sort of then work backwards and see how they develop that during their game. I'll basically look for people who I know are good players, who are doing something that I have very little experience doing, and learn from them that way. Although I shouldn't pretend that I'm doing like way lots of this. It'll be like a couple of hours worth of like really hard focused practice before a tournament, not days.
That makes sense, yeah. So it's a mix of trying the new things, the elements that are truly new. I would guess that maybe in addition to heroes, it would be like new strategies, like Feasting Dragon at level 4 is now a thing you can do.
Yeah, that's the biggest change. The last patch was this unit with, this very interesting, hard to figure out unit getting moved down a whole level. And, I played enough Brawl going into today at that point in the spring championships, it was still level 5, but now, when I see it move down to 4, I'm like, all right, I'm going to try taking a lot of Feasting Dragons over the next few games and see how this works and try and figure out how I feel about it. Yeah, I'll do that kind of thing. I'm sure it sounds like the next patch is going to be huge, and at that point, I'm probably going to have to, go back to basics. And something you can do is that there are websites like SBB Tracker that kind of keep track of the average stats across a lot of heroes, and I do use that as a guide to like, okay, let's try and forget about what my favorite heroes are. What do the actual stats tell me are the heroes that tend to perform best? And what can I learn from this? That's also an important element. And I should say that when you see a website like that, you should take into account, this is the average of all players. You might be somebody who has a certain style. You might thrive on playing a certain kind of hero. Some heroes might be much better in lobbies that are really strong, like maybe the early game heroes have an advantage and the late game heroes fall off a little bit, but that can help a lot. So I sort of combine my own intuition with like the overall stats that apply across all players. I think it's important to consider both of those things.
That makes sense. I'm happy to hear you mention SVB Tracker. We're big fans of that on this podcast. And I've certainly gotten in some online debates about how applicable some of those stats are. Like Horde Dragon, for example, doesn't fare very well on the tracker, but I've heard a lot of players say that it's a top hero. My personal theory is that Horde Dragon is better against weaker players, but I definitely think there's probably a skill element there too, where if you're really strong, maybe even much stronger than the average Mythic player, then you're able to make the right treasure picks and plays and so on to maximize that hero.
Yes, when it comes to SPB Tracker, I think Horde Dragon you mentioned is one of the heroes that seems like it's furthest from where I would expect it to be in the SPB Tracker ratings. It's near the bottom of the hero list, where I think of it as quite a high tier hero. And it's an interesting question because, comparing tournaments to SPB Tracker stats, most SPB Tracker stats are coming from lobbies that are much less competitive than an average tournament lobby, because all the players aren't Mythic. And so if anything, it seems like Horde Dragon is much harder to play than most heroes, would be my assumption here. That a lot of people who are not as experienced in the game have trouble making the right treasure choices or whatever, but when you get like really good players together, they often know exactly what they're looking for, and they're really good at really getting the most value possible out of what treasures are giving them, which makes sense. It seems like it's a lot easier to misuse a treasure than it is to like misuse a unit, which is just a pile of stats, because a treasure can add so much more power to a board if you build well around it. And then, yeah, I would say Horde Dragon's probably like the 5th best hero or something like that, and it's like 25th in the list, where Apocalypse is, I think, a good counterexample, where Apocalypse is something like 10th or so in terms of the best heroes, according to SBB Tracker, but I think it's completely unplayable in a tournament lobby, and would be really, really reluctant to pick it, just because I think it's way too easy to die if you have no hero power for 8 or 9 turns.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I definitely would have agreed with you with Apocalypse, but I very well may be underrating Horde Dragon. Maybe it's just time to really practice with him and get good.
Yeah, I think Horde Dragon, it's just like the treasures being a level ahead. It feels like a real hero power because it's not so hard to get a level 3 treasure in the first 3 or 4 turns of the game. And a lot of the level 3 treasures are things like either it's stuff like Power Orb, where it's just a very, gives you enough raw power to keep up with people who have hero powers, or it's something like Eye of Ares, where you have a chance to like get this really powerful build around very early before other players can get something similar. And then, of course, once you even get to the mid game with War Dragon, if you can double a Nean early, you can have a level 6 treasure 3 or 4 levels before somebody would normally have that. And it's just a huge power spike, let alone what you can pull off if you get like a treasure map. Anyway, Horde Dragon is very good. We'll close there.
Yeah, are there any other heroes from that list that jump out as being either overrated or underrated?
Honestly, most other things seem pretty well placed. I think Grandmother, like Apocalypse, is almost exactly the same thing, where Apocalypse and Grandmother have exactly the same average place on SBB Tracker, and I think they both suffer from the same problems, where just going the entire game without a hero power into level 6 is really punishing. Yeah, it's likely that Catter is probably slightly overrated on SBB Tracker, just because a bunch of people who are not super great at placing units are playing against each other. And I don't mean to like disparage ladder players or anything. This is all in comparison to tournament lobbies where everyone is mythic and it's the highest level play you can get. When the level of play is on average a little bit lower, you end up getting, just raw stats I think have more value, whereas tricky treasure synergies maybe end up having less value. So I think like something like Catter, which is just giving you a pile of stats, might look a bit better compared to like Horde Dragon, which forces you to make a lot more kind of hard, really decisive decisions. Anyway, that's but mostly it seems pretty reasonable. I like the SBB Tracker stats because they do accord with my intuitions and help me. It's like, okay, if I know these 5 heroes are great, and SBB Tracker also thinks these 5 heroes are great, I'm going to assume that like its views on the heroes I play less often are also right. Like I'm going to assume that in fact Trophy Hunter is really bad, even though I don't play Trophy Hunter enough to really know that myself.
Yeah, so one thing you just talked about there is Mad Catter. I think Mad Catter's a hero I've had a really hard time getting my head around. I'm curious on your take on kind of the optimal ways to play Mad Catter, and specifically those early turns where you don't necessarily have enough gold to roll as much as you'd like to actually get the stat bonuses.
Yeah, so Catter, I should emphasize that Catter is a hero I like a lot because it sort of pushes you to play a lot of different styles of game. To me, there's like a spectrum of like how much does a hero force you to do a certain thing, with like Peter Pants and Miri are on like the far left of that spectrum, where every Peter Pants or Miri game kind of looks the same after a certain point. And then Mad Catter and Potion Master to me are on the opposite side of that spectrum, where they offer you just a lot more weird and interesting choices than you would normally get. So like sometimes, Catter rolls a couple of dwarves and you end up playing dwarves, which is nothing you do much on most heroes nowadays. To me, I think you just basically treat it like a bunch of really good stats and try to just get those stats as often as possible, which sounds kind of boring, I'm sure, but like sometimes I feel like when I see other people play Catter, they might go for like, okay, I see like 2 units I kind of like, I'm going to take these 2 units and I'm not going to like roll, even though they do have enough gold that they could like roll, take a unit, roll, take a unit or something. I think people sometimes underestimate in the early turns just how beneficial it is to have a random unit that's +2/+2 or +3/+3, or how beneficial it is to like get that one more roll and have that one more chance at like an upgraded, a boosted poly or a boosted ranged unit or something. So I guess what I'm saying is I would often rather have like 1 random unit with +2/+2 than like 2 random units in the early game. Like a 4/4 is often going to be just as good as 2 2/2s, and it also can stay on your board longer, and it also, is more rewarding if you end up upgrading it or transforming it later, that sort of thing. I think people, I really want to lean into getting as many stats off of Catter as I possibly can, because that just creates these, very powerful units that can do interesting stuff. I realize that's not like a great answer. It would be easier if I were like playing a Catter game right now. But I think basically you roll as often as you can, as long as you can buy units afterwards, and really lean into that hero power a lot.
Gotcha. I mean, that makes sense. It sounds like, for example, on 2.2, when you have 4 gold, you would spend 1 of those gold rolling.
Sometimes. That's actually a classic example. Like, let's say you have 4 gold, and you have the option to either like buy 2 units or roll, buy a unit, roll, and that like then you can lock a powered up unit in the shop. It's sort of like you end up with a similar number of stats, but you also get to pick like a really good unit the next turn at the beginning of your turn, rather than just starting with a normal shop. So that is a particular play pattern that I'll use a lot on Catter if I'm not seeing units I like a lot. Like if I have like 2 tinies and a Minotaur in my shop on 2/2 or whatever, it's like, I don't want any of this. I'm just going to roll and pick something better and then roll again.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sidebar, would you consider 2 tinies and Minotaur to be the worst shop on 2.2?
I mean, you'll have 4 units technically, but I mean, Tiny and Minotaur to me are some of the worst units you can get. Minotaur has more value if you have like some cats or something, but I think Tiny is uncontroversially, I guess, happy little trees, just units that you don't want to pick very often unless you're doing something very unusual with them.
Yeah, the question there really was just, am I overvaluing Tiny?
Yeah, I guess to me, even from the early turns, I want to be thinking in terms of like, even from like 2-0, I mostly want to be taking units that are going to give me some benefit later if I have any choice to do that. Like, like a blind mouse over a tiny, or I don't know, I'll take Pollywogles at any opportunity. I'll take Wizard's Familiar later than some people do, because I think, often Wizard's Familiar can just grow surprisingly quickly. Although, of course, on Catter, Wizard's Familiar, my favorite, one of my favorite units, is not as good as usual. So it's a thing to watch out for as well. As remember, with Catter, you're going to be playing fewer spells, and so spell casty units are less valuable than they normally would be.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear you go through those specific examples. I think my tendency has been to just value getting stats on the board in the early turns and sort of giving yourself the best chance you can to win those level 2, level 3 fights.
Yeah, it depends. I just feel like Tiny doesn't do a good job of winning most fights that, even if it's like, yeah, Tiny can counter a big unit by itself, it's like you still have to get lucky enough to have Tiny hit into the big unit or get it hit into by the big unit versus Tiny running into a cat or something.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I took a couple of Tinies in one of my games and played them with a Fanny, and it was fine. There's nothing against Tiny. It's just like, with Catter especially, I think it's like a matter of, all right, well, would I rather have, a 6-1 and a 5-1 on my board? Or would I rather have like a 5-5 and also a shot at another 5-5 the next turn? And I think a 5-5 is, worth almost 2 X1s early in the game.
Right, yeah. I mean, the math says that a 4-4 is the same size as 2 2-2s. And yeah, you can keep it on your board for longer, like you said.
And yeah, like a 5-5 can sometimes trade with like 3 units, whereas Tiny will only ever trade with 1 unit.
Yeah. So, coming at the Storybook Brawl skills from a different angle, I'm curious if there are any things that you feel like were big level ups for you as you were learning the game and, I suppose, mastering the game.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest level ups was just watching really good players play. And that's one of those things where I would definitely seek out, I definitely tried to seek out, like, who are the strongest players I can find and what are they up to. So watching Redrame in particular, I think Redrame just doesn't stream as often anymore. There was a time when he was streaming a lot and he seemed like clearly the strongest player I could find, and that he was pulling off comps I didn't think were possible, and just generally seemed to have just a very, very strong understanding of the game, like would do things I didn't think were sensible, and then you would just win anyway. I'm like, oh, okay, I have something to learn here. So I think, to me, a level up, I don't think there was one big level up. I think it was more just like paying attention to things I saw other people do that surprised me, paying attention to the comps that were beating me. When I was losing a lot early, I'd be like, okay, what beat me? Not just like, I got unlucky or I didn't get the unit I was looking for, but like, okay, what was my opponent doing that beat me? Were they playing a hero that's better than I think it is? Were they playing some combination of units that was really strong and I, didn't think it was very good for some reason because I disrespect this unit too much or whatever? I think, in pretty much any endeavor in life, you want to learn from, okay, I failed here. What can I learn from this? What could I have done differently? What was the thing that happened that I wasn't expecting? There's almost always something to learn there. So I think I'm pretty strongly anti-salt, unless the salt is, unless you're learning alongside feeling salty.
Yeah, so it's a combination of watching other people play, seeing them make different decisions, and thinking about and maybe even asking them, why did you make that decision? And then looking through your own gameplay, figuring out why things didn't work out, and addressing those things in your gameplay moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think because I was used to playing Magic and having a very good sense for like, okay, I know the Magic thing inside and out. I can pretty much understand what the right play is in almost all scenarios. But I had to recognize, okay, this game is very different, even though it feels like, I don't know, it's weird because it's hard to remember almost, like starting out with the game was many months ago, many hundreds of hours of play ago now. But there were definitely times when I was just like, okay, this seems like it should be a good strategy, but I just keep losing. Why am I losing?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think that's something that I and probably a lot of our listeners should stand to do, is just go back, maybe even record some games, look back at how they went.
Yeah, that was also helpful, is when I was recording for stream or something. I didn't do much recording my own games, but I think that's an excellent way to learn, is record, talk through what you're thinking at the time, and then go back and look at, oh, okay, I could have gotten this unit instead of this unit, and it would have helped.
Yeah, that's something I noticed reading your tournament report. Even though largely things went pretty well for you, you had a lot of little notes about, oh, I could have spent more gold rolling here, or I missed that these 2 things were in the shop that I could have bought that would have given me a better chance to win that next fight.
Yeah, the tournament report, I think, does capture kind of exactly how I was thinking about those games. It's not, it's not just there because I threw it in there to write the report. It's like that's the chorus that's going through my head at all times.
All times. That's pretty impressive.
Maybe not all times. I mean, I play a lot of Storybook Brawl when I'm watching Netflix or something. It's just like a thing to do on the side, at which point, that's more for fun. But when I'm doing the deliberate practice, I guess, even when I'm by myself and no one's watching, that's what's going through my head.
Makes sense, yeah. So next thing I wanted to ask about is your take on the current metagame, and maybe sort of a two-part question. Just like in general, what do you think are the best strategies on the current patch? What has worked for you, what hasn't? And then I also have some specific cards I want to ask you about after that.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like the patch has, the last patch changed very much. I guess if you've been away from Storybook Brawl for a while, the current status of all the comps is that dwarves are totally unplayable, trees are the best comp, good boy is the other best comp, evil is always pretty good, animals can occasionally be good if it lines up well. Am I forgetting anything? Probably forgetting. Oh, Slay. Slay comes together, but only if you have the right treasures. I think if you play enough games, if you play like 10 matches of Storybook Brawl, you probably get a pretty good sense of where things are from that, for the most part. I'm trying to think of any special observations. I guess it feels like trees did not get much weaker despite the last patch trying to nerf trees a bunch. They're maybe a little bit less dominant than 4, but still, probably the easiest flexible late game comp to get into that just ends up rewarding you with a ton of stats. I think in general, feels like people just underrate mages a lot most of the time. I felt like that for most patches. I think I just I'll take Crystal Ball in more places than most people would, because I think, if you can get into a good mage comp, you can kind of just beat anything. Yeah, I might be better talking about specific units or something, because I don't think I have that much. It's hard for me to tell what I know that, other people don't notice, because I think it's pretty clear what the reasonable late game things are to do. I do think more so than the meta right now, what you should do really depends on, the seat you find yourself in and the units that are showing up in your shop. I think a lot of different things are good enough to win lobbies, and you should not be too focused on this unit is part of the best comp, therefore I'll buy this unit, even if it makes no sense on my current board, because I'm just going to try and hope to get into trees or whatever. Play the units that are in front of you, and recognize that a lot of different things can win a lobby.
Brawling the hard way, maybe?
Brawling the hard way, yeah, if we're going to take a page out of Magic's drafting the hard way style.
Yeah, I do have a couple of specific questions about the comps you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You still think trees is the strongest in-game comp, I'm assuming. I found that a little bit hard to get into now that Burning Tree doesn't seem like it's very good if you just buy it with no support. Are you doing Heartwood Elders? Are you just taking Ashwood Elms at 6?
Yeah, often I'll end up with an early Ashwood Elm and pick up Burning Trees after that more often, so I'm not wasting time with a Burning Tree on my board that doesn't work, but if you have an upgraded Sportgo or an early Grumblegore or a Dracula Saber and you can stick the Burning Tree in the back to pick up all the buffs, that also, there are still plenty of ways to make Burning Tree a perfectly serviceable unit. It's still a pretty okay 5-drop in the sense that, like many units, you'll play it only if you have some support for it, but it's there are plenty of ways you can end up with support for it, even like a Sting or something, and it's totally reasonable.
Okay, so are you deciding to go into trees when you see the Burning Trees?
I mean, usually I have to see a couple of pieces. Maybe I poly into a tree and then I see another tree, or I see an Ashwood Elm and it's like, oh, okay, I don't have a good direction right now. Therefore, this Ashwood Elm helps me go into trees. But if I see a good boy, maybe I'd be going into good boy instead. I think when I say trees the best comp, I just mean I think that I don't mean you should force it. I don't mean you should really try to go for it too hard, much harder. I just think if it's available, it's pretty much the best thing to be doing. As in, if you take a bunch of units that are the tree units, you end up with a better board than people who are taking all the evil units and ending up with, an evil board. Again, this is a huge oversimplification because treasures matter so much. A board of trees against, Mirror Mirror Scam is still going to lose.
Right. Another question about Slay. You mentioned treasures. First of all, what treasures are you thinking of? The support ones? Bad Moon?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make a few different kinds of Slay comp work. I think my feeling about Slay is that there was a time when I would be more likely to try just forcing it and running with it. And I think playing in tournaments made me realize, oh, wait, Slay is the kind of thing that works really well in ladder, because the fundamental thing about Slay is you have to be attacking and killing your enemy units. And on ladder, this tends to be much easier to do when your opponents are playing kind of weaker units. They're just not adding as many stats to their units, and you get Slays easier, and it snowballs from there, where if you run into a couple of players who have kind of weak boards, you get a massive bonus as the Slay player. And I found that in tournament lobbies, it's a little bit too likely that you just run into a couple of players who are quite strong, and you don't actually get the Slays, and then your board just remains weak. It's like this unreliable form of scaling that gets much harder to do when you're in a tournament setting. Even though you still can pull it off, it's just harder.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think it matches with my experience as well. I think I probably see, Jormungand comps in the top 2 more often than I see Ashwood Elms, but as you said, if you're playing against weak players, you can get slays more easily.
Yeah, that felt like, I mean, I think I played 7 tournament games this morning, and I don't think I saw a single slay comp in the top 2. There was one person who tried to build one and then just couldn't find the treasures and had to give it up and do something else. But I saw, half of my games involved somebody with trees in the finals.
Yeah. So then when you do build Slay, and maybe this is more on ladder, are you going Lancelot Grimsoul, or are you doing Riverwish Mermaid Lightning Dragon, or some combination?
I mean, all of the above, I guess. It's like, there are different pieces, and you want to put the pieces together in a way such that you end up with a good comp, but you can... if you think there are like 7 or 8 different units and treasures that can form part of a sleigh build, you just need some combination of them together working well. I would say that the most likely way that for me to end up into sleigh is either I see like Dragon and Riverwish together early, or I see like an early Bad Moon and have an opportunity to take at least one sleigh unit. Or I guess I see an early Lancelot and then happen to hit a treasure off of it at the right time I see a Baba. It's like, I need to see like a couple of signs together before I get interested. With maybe Bounty Board being the main exception, I do think that if you see an early Bounty Board and your other level 2 treasures aren't very good, it can be worth just trying to build around it because Bounty Board has such a tremendous effect on the game.
Yeah, it's one of the highest ceiling level 2 treasures for sure.
Yeah, but I wouldn't, if I have a normal enough comp, I'm not just going to grab Evil Eye and say, all right, Evil Eye, now I'm Slay. I'm much more likely to just take a treasure with some stats and try to build toward a different level, level 6 comp, unless I already have other pieces at the time.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so I think the next thing is, I mentioned some specific cards, and full disclosure to the listeners, I did send Erin the list beforehand, so I'm not just throwing these at you blind, but, some characters, spells, treasures that, are either controversial or just interesting to talk about. First character I wanted to ask about is Pollywoggle. So I think this was a pretty, trying to think of a different word besides ballsy.
You can say ballsy. I'll own up to it.
Anyway, pretty impressive play. In the final round of the tournament, you're playing Gwyn and you knighted Pollywoggle on round 1. And I'm curious, what was the thinking behind that, and does that reflect your valuation of Pollywoggle more broadly?
All right, so about knighthooding a Pollywoggle, my feeling is basically Gwen has no hero power until you use knighthood, and so I'm eager to use knighthood as early as I possibly can on Gwen. And to me, Pollywoggle is, once it's a 2-2, it's almost certain that I can get it to slay either on 2-0, 2-1, 3-0, or 3-1, and any of those are like a huge bonus to me. Between Stag, between spells I can cast on the Polly, between Mim, there's like a lot of ways to power it up enough to get a slay if that's what I'm really focused on doing. And having an upgraded unit really early on that's like a level above where it should be and is also upgraded, both makes a comp very strong and gives me a very strong direction, like a very strong shot at getting an early lead and hitting first. If I get an upgraded pig very early, it's like I've got a Fool's Gold. Or if I have, I ended up with an upgraded Shadow Assassin, it's like, okay, this Shadow Assassin is worth like 3 units on most people's boards right now, which definitely makes up for, having taken a Poly and maybe taking some early hits. Like if there were a hero that could give you a couple of free units early, that's a pretty good hero. I mean, it's actually Headless Horseman. But if the free units were actually something that could be part of your final comp instead of just giving you some random 2s early in the game, like that Shadow Assassin was on my board until, quite late.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Would you knight a Pollywoggle over Happy Little Tree? You mentioned that you weren't as big a fan of that one.
Yeah, Happy Little Tree, I don't know. It just kind of forces you to do a very specific thing, and it sort of overstays its welcome at some point. Like, unless you happen to find a TLK for it, it's not going to manage to make it past like 4-1 or 4-2 or whatever, probably. Unless you have like a Darkwood Creeper or some other weird thing going on. If I had the choice between those two, I would have thought hard about it, but probably still knighted the Poly. Happy Little Tree not being like a part of the trees build anymore, not boosting Shoulder Fairies anymore because, you're not supposed to take Shoulder Fairies.
Yeah, we did an episode on Gwyn a while back, and I don't think we gave Pollywoggle serious consideration. But yeah, it's kind of good to hear that argument. What's your take on Pollywoggle more generally? Do you take it on 2.0 over stuff like Tiny on most heroes? And then when do you try to set up Grimsoul Pollywoggle later?
I would say almost certainly over Tiny, unless I'm like playing a hero like Zelwa where I'm just trying to desperately preserve health no matter what. Tiny to me is almost like, it's sort of like Reed's 2-mana 1/1 gives you back like 2 to 3 gold at some point in the future. And that to me is a strong unit. It's sort of like a chicken plus extra spike potential at the end, because if Poly eventually turns into a 3-drop or a 4-drop, you're sort of getting a big discount. Even if it turns into a 4-drop when the 4-drop's not amazing, you're still getting like a huge discount on a powerful unit that you get to keep on your board for a while. And that's a really good effect. I think it's worth, maybe sacrificing a little bit of health earlier, taking a few risks to get an effect that powerful.
That makes sense. I hadn't thought about Pollywoggle as an economy unit, but I like that framing.
Yeah, it's like, you can spike, but even if you don't spike, it's like, okay, I have a Juliet, it's 3-1, now I can pick up a Romeo. Or, okay, I have a Lightning Dragon, I'm going to pick up a Happy Little Tree, and now my Lightning Dragon's just going to kill 3 units because it's going to attack with flying, and then trade with something in the front row. So many over-leveled units are just unbelievably good early if you can find support for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, next character on the list, Brave Princess. And I think most of the question here is, when do you stop taking Brave Princess? I assume you're willing to take her on 3.0 and maybe 3.1?
Yeah, I'll take Brave Princess every time on 3.0 unless there's a very compelling reason not to. Like, I don't know, some double treasure turn or something. To me, it's like, you can pretty much always get her to slay 3 times on 3.0, and then a free level 3 treasure with your unit's amazing. She's, like, much more reliable than, like, Nutcracker on 4.0, for example. On 3.1, I'm usually willing to do it, especially if I have some way to boost her power, but, often will be willing to try it anyway, just because I can always pick up a Grim Soul to trigger her later, but I guess 3.1 is, like, either I have something to boost her power, or I think I can, I'm strong enough to afford playing a maybe slightly underpowered unit for a while, or I'm a hero that really badly wants to hit certain level 3 treasures. So, Celestial Tiger loves Brave Princess. Something like Peter Pants, where you really want certain level 3 treasures, likes Brave Princess a lot. Something like Potion Master, where getting Crystal Ball is, incredible. Likes Brave Princess a lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. But then after that, maybe not.
Once it's to 3-2, it's pretty dubious. Unless, maybe I have a Golden Stag or something. It's like, okay, I put my princess behind the Golden Stag, I'm going to go slay, slay, slay. Or maybe my Pollywoggle turned into an Arthur. I'm like, okay, there's a really good reason for me to want to have an upgraded Royal now. But it would have to be pretty unusual circumstances for me to like it on 3-2.
Yeah, makes sense. What about the Chupacabra? So main reason I'm asking is, I don't think the Chupacabra is that popular, and I'm curious, if you think there are any situations where you would take it.
It's weird. I tend to like it in theory. I like scaling units. I like scaling units that buff ranged units. Scaling ranged units is incredibly powerful. But my experience is that the Chupacabra just seems like it has a pretty tough time slaying, unless you really baby it, or you have some way to boost its stats. I think I will generally not take Chupacabra unless there's some circumstance going on the board or in the shop that makes it favorable. So favorable circumstances would include, okay, there's a worm root in the shop and I can buff it immediately. Or, I happen to have 2 support ranged units already. I've got a Sporko and a Lady of the Lake, and this Chupacabra is going to be a 12-8 right away and boosting 2 ranged units when it attacks. Or maybe I've got a bounty board. It's okay, I'll take anything that says slay on it because the reward is so much higher. But in general, I don't think of it as, it's not to me in the ranks of level 4 units I'll just take because they're powerful. And, it's not Sporko, it's not Lady, it's not Lightning Dragon, it's not Monster Book, none of that kind of thing.
Oh, interesting. Do you take Lightning Dragon just sort of without support?
I often will. It helps if I have some support, but I think, on 4.0, it's likely enough to trade with a good pile of stats from your opponent's board that I'm down to try it, and I think it opens you up to some good possibilities later. It's sort of, to me, the bottom of the first tier of 4 drops or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. I certainly end up taking it a lot when I have a Stag, or especially Golden Stag.
Yeah, it's great with Stag. It's good with Copycat, if you're happen to be doing that for some reason, though I don't advise it. And obviously great with anything that boosts toughness.
Yeah. Speaking of Copycat, well, sort of indirectly, I suppose, what do you make of the new Feasting Dragon change? When do you take that, and what do you do with the shot bonuses if you can get it slaying?
I guess I see Feasting Dragon as sort of just a generic value unit more than anything else. It's not something I'm Feasting Dragon, now we're doing it. I'm going to build around this. It's more okay, I have a power boost, and this Feasting Dragon is going to generate, I don't know, you can think of it as if it slays, imagine you're getting between 2 and 3 gold, because Gingerbread Houses cost 3 gold, you don't always take it. If it costs 2 gold, you'd probably take it, almost all the time. Therefore, maybe Feasting Dragon Slay is worth 2.5 gold or something. And that's pretty good. I mean, compare that to Chupacabra, where Chupacabra's Slay being +2/+0 to 3 units is maybe worth 1.5 to 2 gold or something. Yeah, I will generally not take Feasting Dragon unless I have a way to boost it, but if I can boost it on 4.0 or 4.1, I'm quite interested. Things you can do well with big stats are it makes Wombats much better, if you can get those later. Any ranged unit, it can help to get Lancelot into range faster. But yeah, it is, even on 4, there are a lot of units that don't benefit that much from getting just some extra stats who are starting to look more for synergy at that point. But I would say, yeah, ranged units, Wombats, Tweedles, anything where the stats are Friendly Spirit, anything where the stats are paying you off twice because the unit can safely attack multiple times, or it pumps some other unit when it dies, or it pumps its own token when it dies.
Yeah, that makes sense. Continuing the trend of characters that are not taken very often, do you ever do anything with Fairy Godmother these days?
Yeah, I played Fairy Godmother in one of my tournament games today. It's a perfectly reasonable unit. I wouldn't... It's not, to me, in my top tier of 4s because you have to have a certain board to play it, but if I have a bunch of good units, Godmother is one of the best things you can be doing on 4.0 or 4.1. It's, it pairs really well with treasures like Ring of Rage, it pairs really well with Peep, and if you have an early baby bear for some reason, maybe off of Polly or a True Love's Kiss, Godmother can be a great way to take advantage of that. It's good at proccing Lancelot, it's good at proccing Nutcracker Prince. I think it's a perfectly solid unit. You just need to, take it when it's, has the board that it's supposed to have.
What board do you think you have?
Oh, just a board full of good units. In particular, what you want is lots of good units that die, so ideally there are some good tokens, or at the very least, you have 4 good units up front, and then you want some really high-powered good unit in the back that benefits a lot from getting the extra health.
Right. My first thought would be Lancelot, because you're getting an instant treasure, but I guess there's Donkey or something if you still got one lying around.
Yeah, so Donkey's an example, so a Golden Donkey is another good reason. That's the unit that benefits a lot from having more health. But I was thinking also just like, okay, I've got an upgraded Brave Princess and some treasures, so I've got like a 12 power good unit. If I can get it to be like a 12-20, it's going to win me a couple of fights when I'm just beating people down with it. I mean, Godmother's a lot of stats. It's just a lot of stats if you have a board. I really don't see why it wouldn't be good.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's like a 420 or something. Would you take a 420 for 4 gold? I think you would.
When you put it like that, I probably would, yeah. No, this is really helpful, though. I mean, I think Storybook Brawl is a game where there's not as much content out there. So at least my experience has been that it's hard to kind of get a sense of where things are at, and you can kind of get locked into your own opinions of where things are good and not. So I know this is helpful for me. Hopefully it's helpful for our listeners, too, and sort of resetting the value of some characters that maybe they were not considering very much previously.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I don't play Beauty. I imagine that Godmother's also excellent on Beauty. It can help to remember when you've cast a Beauty's influence on something, that makes students like Godmother better later.
Yeah, that's certainly something I pay attention to for Good Boy, but Godmother is a good point as well, yeah.
She is the good boy of level 4. Not even joking, really. I like Godmother.
Okay, yeah. Good to know.
I don't tend to take a lot of good units early. I don't like Royals that much. But if you happen to be doing that kind of thing, obviously she's great.
All right, so then moving on to some more controversial treasures. What do you think of Eye of Ares?
Yeah, I think it's fine. You have to know your place. Like any treasure, it sort of depends on what the other 2 treasures are alongside it. I think most of the time I take Eye of Ares, it's because I have 2 treasures I can't really use very well next to it. But as far as like the stats it can offer, in terms of, if you have the right board for it, it's among the most powerful level 3 treasures there is. It's quite good if you have a bunch of tokens. It's quite good if you have a bunch of ranged units. It can sort of pair very nicely with Godmother, I guess, because Godmother can give you enough toughness that it doesn't even matter that your opponent's units have the extra 5 power, as long as you're killing them with every hit. And of course, it seems like in theory it could be good with Slay, but it's not really that good with Slay because you're still kind of trading 1 for 1. You just really need to make sure if you're playing Eye of Ares, you need to reliably say, is this better for my board than my opponent's board? And if you have lots of tokens and ranged units, probably. If you're playing a Slay board and you run into somebody who has a Peep, you're going to be sad.
That makes sense, yeah. Ranged, and then, yeah, token summoners.
Or, Mummy, just anything that is using its power multiple times.
Yeah. All right. How about Pandora's Box? Is that a treasure you would take mostly to like give you a direction early? Would you take it over something like let's say it's 4-0, you're a little bit ahead of the lobby, you get an early Pandora's Box. Do you take that over something like Embiggening Stone or Spear of Achilles? Are you taking it later, or are you taking it at all, actually?
Pandora's Box is a treasure that to me is like, well, I am somewhat ahead and I would like to convert that into a win. If I'm way behind but managed to get a lucky early level 6 treasure, I'm going to take Spear of Achilles to not die most of the time. Because Pandora's Box, you have to remember, there's a good chance that what it gives you is going to be either Holy Grail or something like Mirror Mirror, where it's not going to give you that many stats up front unless you can take advantage of it. Like, you got to figure, okay, Pandora's Box is for when I know I'm going to survive at least 2 more turns, even without a treasure here. But in exchange, I get, a higher chance of winning the late game than I would with most level 6 treasures. Yeah, you gotta remember, basically, you can't count on getting any one thing from it, so it's very rare that I'll take Pandora's Box to be like, okay, I'm gonna take this because I need round table for this comp. Unless, I guess one good reason to take Pandora's Box is, let's say you're a high health person going into the end of a lobby, but you're up against an opponent who's much stronger than you. It's hard to find a level 6 treasure that's gonna fix that, much of the time. Pandora's Box can give you several treasures that can potentially fix it, even if you're at risk of hitting something that doesn't help at all.
Right, yeah, it's hard to compete with Black Prism mages or Mirror Mirror Scam or lots of Mirror Mirror things, actually.
Holy Grail anything. Yeah. But yeah, I think I like it quite a bit. I don't know that I take it more than average, though. I feel like I see people have it reasonably often, but I think it's, somewhere in the middle of the level 6 treasures in terms of how often I'm taking it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right, how about Easter egg? When do you think it's correct to go for Easter egg? And I guess I'll say, when is it correct on the Fates, and when is it correct for everybody else?
I personally just don't like taking Humpty Dumpty at all. I think I take it less than most people do. I'm still smarting from... So today's tournament, I had first, third, 6th, 8th as my placements. The 6th was my own fault. The 6th was me forgetting an interaction between 2 units and having a weaker board and dying a couple turns earlier than I was supposed to because I lost a key fight. That's fine. That's my bad. The 8th was when I took APOC, grabbed an egg because I'm like, egg will help me survive, and then I ran into Zelwa, who had also taken an egg, and did not win a single fight that game, I think. And the same thing happened to me in the Spring Championships, where I took an egg and then played against Cursed King that had 2 units and just cracked my egg on turn 1. I feel like it's often... I will take almost any plausible unit over egg much of the time. It's like, times I'm taking egg, it's like, all right, I'm up against an opponent who I'm sure is not going to crack it on round 1. Like if it's, I don't know, Piper. Piper's never going to crack your egg round 1 because Piper's going to take an animal. Piper's not going to take an egg. You're safe. Or like, Skip is not going to crack your egg round 1. In fact, Skip's probably not going to crack your egg round 2 because Skip's going to take a 3-cost unit, and there are no 3-cost units that can crack egg. But if you're up against somebody who's like, well, this person has some tiny chance of taking an egg, I'd be very reluctant just because I hate the idea of being down that much that early. I mean, there are exceptions, right? If your shop is like egg, baby root, 4 glory, then, starting with egg into baby root 4 glory is like, hey, you might just have an extra unit very early on. That can be quite powerful. But I will usually try to avoid it. And then, as a result, I almost never get Easter egg. I think I had Easter egg once in my last 50 games or something. And yeah, it's an okay treasure. It's not that spectacular, and you have to take a bunch of risks to get there. I probably am more scared of egg than I should be because I've had a couple of bad isolated experiences that really knocked me off of it. But in my experience, just playing like a normal game and not trying to go for the power spike of egg is often just totally fine. Like it's one of my less picked 2-drops. And then as far as Fates goes, yeah, that's often, for some people, going to be an exception. I don't know. Every time I've played Fates in a tournament so far, or in any setting really, I found some unit that felt good to take besides egg. I think it's more acceptable to take on Fates than most heroes. I think it's an okay pick. I would still probably go with like Wizard's Familiar or Cinderella over a turn 1 egg on Fates much of the time. I just, again, don't think Easter egg's great. I think you're at risk of running into like a Loki or I don't know, some other person who has some random big unit that just happens to take out your egg, and then your whole Easter egg plan is kind of ruined at that point.
Sure. And you're not taking the egg and not playing it because that puts you too far behind.
I had not even considered that. I guess that's a thing you could do. There's probably some shop you could build where I would feel compelled to take the egg and not play it. But yeah, you have to give me something very good if you're going to take like 6 to 10 health from me for free.
Okay, speaking of random effects, I guess this may be a similar category to Pollywoggle. How much do you prioritize Genie's Wish? And I guess I would say probably outside of the 2.1, because I assume you and most people would cast it 2.1.
I think Genie's Wish is awesome. I would usually avoid it on 2.0 and 2.2. 2.0 for obvious reasons, and 2.2 because it's a little bit too likely you get some random pump spell and don't get to buy 2 units. But I mean, I might still take a 2.2 if I have like a Cinderella or Wizard's Familiar and it's actually giving me stats. But I take Genie's Wish a lot in the mid game. Like, I think much more often than most players do, just because, like, the worst case scenario is, okay, you paid 1 gold and if you get gold, you lose 2 life. That's fine. You roll, it's like, fine, whatever. I was going to roll this shop anyway if I didn't have anything I wanted to buy. If you get like a stat booster, it's like, okay, I paid 1 gold for an effect that's worth, maybe half a gold for me or something. I lost half a gold. That's fine, whatever. But then sometimes you get a gingerbread house or a wish or something else that's like, wow, this is actually really strong. What the hell? And to me, like, I think the average value of the spell you get off of the Genie's Wish feels like it's, solidly over 1. And that's just like pure profit to me, even if you take away all the spellcaster effects of it. So I like Genie's Wish quite a bit. I think it's just like a chance, a pretty cheap way to get a chance at a large power spike.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Would you take out on like 5.0 or something if you had the gold?
Yeah, probably. 5.0, I can still use experience. I can still I guess on 5.0 you can't quite get a knighthood off of it yet. I mean, I often get an offensive spell that's like, worth at least 1 gold to me too. Like a smite or a lightning bolt's a totally fine thing to pay 1 gold for.
Sure.
I'm really, really pretty into Genie's Wish. As long as I don't have some other explicit plan for him to spend my gold that turn. If I need to buy 10 gold worth of units and I have 10 gold, I'm not going to buy Genie's Wish.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Just a couple more things I wanted to ask you about.
Of course.
Healing potion. My former co-host and I had a pretty extensive debate about when it was correct to take healing potion. I won't tell you what side I was on, but I want to hear when you take it.
To me, it's just like, I think there are times you should take it that seem pretty obvious to me. I guess I usually don't take it unless it's free. But, if I have an awkward gold sitting around, I'll spend it on healing, sure. Or I'll, I would usually, I guess, buy healing potion over a random roll if I had 1 gold left at the end of the turn.
Okay, yeah, that's more or less what I was wondering. My take was, if you have something good to do with the gold, if you have like a specific thing that you're trying to buy or roll for, I wouldn't necessarily take it, but I do think it might be reasonable. And this is more theory crafting. It's something that's kind of hard to test. But my thinking is that paying 1 gold for 1 life is kind of hard to measure, but like, would you pay 5 gold? Would you take a 5 gold tax over the course of 5 turns for 5 life? And my thinking is maybe I would. Like, the old Cursed King had the ability to give you 1 gold in exchange for 1 life, and that was a terrible exchange in the other direction. So
I liked Old Cursed King, so maybe I'm the wrong person to ask about this. I thought Old Cursed King was kind of okay. I mean, it was not very good, but for the first, 10 turns or so, you were in a great position.
Sure, yeah, you just spent the end game at 1 life. Okay, yeah, good to hear that opinion. I'll think on it some more.
Yeah, I generally treat life as not a super valuable resource compared to board power, unless it's like Ring of Regeneration, where, Ring of Regeneration is actually 7 life. And that's obviously a huge chunk. It's doing like, what are the odds that this amount of life actually leaves me in for another round? And for the number 1, the odds are not very good at all. But for something much higher, like Ring of Regen or random, whatever the spell is that gains you health and experience at the same time, the odds are much better.
Yeah, the end. Yeah, well, Ring of Regeneration and Spinning Wheel are both level 2 treasures, and they seem...
Yeah, I'll almost always take Spinning Wheel over Ring of Regeneration. That's another way to think about it. But I think Regeneration's pretty good, and I would take it over many other treasures, so not valueless.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you on that bit. All right, last spell for you, Gingerbread Party. And you sort of talked about this with Feasting Dragon already. When do you take Gingerbread Party? Is it similar to like an XP spell for you on level 3?
I guess you could say that. I take it a lot. If I can take Gingerbread Party and like another unit, and the Gingerbread Party's like substituting for a unit, I'll quite often do that if that unit was just going to give me stats. If it's not like a Brave Princess or something where I need to stack it up. It's like, if you buy Gingerbread Party before you buy your other unit for the turn, it's already basically a 1/1.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's already giving you some stats.
So would you buy it on like 3.0 then?
Yeah. Almost, and special circumstances might dictate otherwise, but it's one of my favorite things to see on 3.0.
That is fascinating.
It's like, think of it as a 1/1 that grows by 1 for every unit you buy for the rest of the game. That starts out small, but after like a couple of turns, it's quite competitive. And it's just going to get much bigger from there.
What about on Peter Pants?
Peter Pants much less likely, right? Because Pants is entirely dependent on getting treasures. So any gold you're not spending on units is a real downer. So that would be a special circumstance of the kind I was thinking. But if it's like, I don't know, just some arbitrary random hero that doesn't depend on getting certain treasures, I like a lot.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Thanks for taking the time to go through all those. One thing I learned just from co-hosting a podcast is that card evaluations tend to diverge pretty wildly. So I suspect that a lot of our listeners will hear this and think, oh, wow, I'd never take Gingerbread Party or something like that. So...
And the thing is that nobody plays this game even close to optimally, so I could be wildly wrong on a lot of this despite winning a lot of matches, but I await the day when we actually have really good stats on units and spells and so on, and I can finally see whether or not I was correct. Does SBB Tracker even have something like that? That's actually reasonable?
I think they only cover heroes. There was another tracker a while back that covered stats on characters, but it was kind of hard to interpret. I did some digging.
Yeah, I remember that being the case.
I mean, I know how powerful 17 lands has been for Magic drafting.
Yeah, the 17 lands for Storybook Brawl, it'll happen at some point.
Yeah, I feel like you'd have to look at it from not only what character do you buy, but when did you buy it? Like, if people are buying Brave Princess on 4.0, then that's really going to skew the stats. I don't know if people are doing that, but
yeah, that's what a good tracker would be like. What are this thing's stats on different turns if you buy it then? I'd be very interested to see Gingerbread Party. That's one of the first places I'd look. But I think it's great. I guess I should also say that when it comes to Gingerbread Party, it's not like you have a 1/1 that's gaining stats exactly. It's more like, hey, it's a 1/1 that's gaining stats, but you don't actually have to play it on your board because all the stats are appearing on units that you want to play anyway. As soon as you have a full board, Gingerbread Party is just amazingly better than most 3 drops are. And, you'll have a full board pretty quick once you're at on level 3.
Right. And you're stacking the stats too.
Yeah, your golden units end up having +2/+2, your range units are better, your friendly spirits are better, just, or another way to think of it is like, Power Orb's a pretty good treasure.
Yeah.
I would, and Gingerbread, I guess Gingerbread Party is exactly Fairy Tale, which is like a very good level 2 treasure, and I'm down to spend 3 gold on most very good level 2 treasures. I think that's a worthy price to pay.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. So I guess last Storybook Brawl question for you. The game's been around for, 8-9 months? Been through a lot of changes. There was the recent FTX acquisition. They've announced a bunch of new pro play stuff. We're looking at potentially a mobile release and an expansion. Where do you see the game going from here? What would you like to see in Storybook Brawl's future?
Well, fortunately, they released a roadmap, so hopefully you don't have to guess too much at where the game goes from here. Some things that I'm excited to see are like just more variety to the base game. So like expansions are one part of this. Having enough units in the pool that you can have like different sets of units that are available at different times seems interesting, although really hard to balance. I understand it's probably going to be a while before we have that. Very excited to see different kinds of game modes show up. Like everyone has a crystal ball, or right now they're testing Storybook Brawl 99, which sounds pretty fun. A 99-player version of the normal game, which I thought was an April Fool's joke when I see it, but apparently is not an April Fool's joke because it wasn't the right day. So it seems like a cool game engine. I think there's a lot of different ways you can kind of build variety into it. I'm excited to see more heroes show up, of course. I'm excited to see some tweaks. I think I would like to see the heroes be like a little bit more even than they currently are. My dream version of Storybook Brawl is that like every hero decision's like kind of tricky because they're all balanced out really well. And I think this goes even for the starter heroes. I think Krampus should, start giving +2/+2 to evil units starting at level 4 or something like that. I wouldn't mind seeing the heroes have some heroes have 52 starting health, other heroes have 38 starting health or whatever. Whatever it takes to get those win rates pretty even. That's my personal thing. I don't know that would actually be good for the game, but I would like it. What else do I see? I could open this roadmap and I guess see what's actually on the roadmap and see which things are most exciting about that.
We did take a look at that on the podcast last week, but certainly interested to hear your takes.
Yeah, okay, here it is. So what am I excited about? I'm excited to see more exploration of the stats, figure out what the actual numbers are that underlie some of our intuitions, which units turn out to be super underrated or whatever. Pretty interested to see mostly I want to see the game grow a lot. I want the game to be really popular and have tons of players, and I'm excited for anything that helps it get close to that. So maybe mobile is something like that, maybe the new hero skins, maybe it's just lots of marketing and successful promotions. I mostly just want, when I say, hey, I'm the Storybook Brawl Spring Champion, I want people to be like, cool, as opposed to what? So it's my own pride at work. And I think new art eventually could be pretty good. My wife is, one of the reasons that she got really into Magic is that she thought Magic was, aesthetically pretty good looking. And she's, been a Magic player at times in the past before she was a medical resident, which means no time for video games. Whereas when she sees Storybook Brawl, she just kind of laughs out loud and can't quite take it seriously because it looks so goofy to her. And I feel like the eventual enhancements to the art and so on are going to be pretty neat. I do like the current aesthetic quite a bit, but I'm curious to see, if everything looks like super cool 3D Potion Master, but it's on all the cards. That could be neat. But yeah, mostly it's about getting more players in the game and more really strong players. Because to me, the most fun part of playing a game is when I am up against somebody who's, knows just as much as I do when we're both playing the game at the highest level. We're both in the dance of death where both players, neither can afford to miss a step. That sort of thing is always what's most interesting to me, is kind of two players just pushing each other to ever greater heights. And I think that becomes easier when there are more players in the game, when the rewards are bigger for playing in tournaments, and when everybody has had more time to get practice.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's funny. You mentioned your wife dating in Magic. That actually, I think, might have been the first thing I heard about you, because she had that Reddit thread about how she played for a week and made Mythic.
Mm-hmm. It's her fun fact, and I really, really did very little to assist her besides helping her understand some rules interactions. She would actively stop me from offering advice if I happen to see her playing.
Yeah, that's great. A very strategically inclined family, I guess.
Mm-hmm. She's a smart cookie. She just uses her skills to take people apart and put them together again instead of win video games. So, priorities, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of which, I think that might be a good segue because we've talked a lot about Storybook Brawl, but I also wanted to ask about your day job. I know that you've worked in several different effective altruism organizations. I've talked about effective altruism a bit on the podcast before because that's something that I'm interested in, although I guess I haven't fully committed in the sense of making it my job, but I'd be curious to hear you talk a bit about what's effective altruism from your perspective, and then what do you do related to it?
Yeah, so I guess, like a lot of people, I want to have, I want my life to like have a lot of impact on the lives of other people. I was lucky enough in my life to have grown up in pretty fortunate circumstances, to have gone to a really good college, to have kind of a lot of different life paths set out before me. And so, because I was pretty sure that like I was going to have enough money to live and, be able to support myself, my next question was, okay, how can I like do as much good as possible for other people? Like, if I'm taken care of, other people matter a lot too. And what can I do to achieve that? And it turns out there's a whole branch of, I don't know if you'd call it philosophy or something else, but a social movement called Effective Altruism, which is a bunch of people trying to answer that question for themselves. And of course, the question of how do you do the most good possible for other people is really, really hard. It's like, what is the best thing to do is like asking, what's the best food to eat, or what is the best book to read? It's like, it does not have a clean, simple answer. But there are a few things that, people tend to think are reasonable things to do. For example, there are charities that can help other people very, very effectively, and finding ways to either support those charities by working a job that gives you spare income to do that, or working for those charities directly, or doing research to find other ways to help people a lot. So this could be like medical research, or research on how to grow developing economies so that people are wealthier faster and can actually afford to support themselves. Or you could look the other way and say, okay, what are some really bad things that could happen, and can we make those things less likely? For example, there's a lot of debate right now going on about how we should best defend against the next pandemic, and a lot of people who are, who see their careers through their lens of effective altruism are thinking about, okay, this pandemic was one of the worst things that has happened in the last few decades. What does it take to make it much less likely it happens again? How can we prepare for that? How much money should we be willing to spend on that? The answer, of course, being hundreds of billions of dollars, probably. And how can we get, our governments to do this? How can we dedicate the right resources to medical research to achieve that? So I guess very, very simply put, effective altruism is about using your life to try and do as much good as you can for other people. But of course, there are limits to everything. I still play video games. I still, buy food that isn't rice and beans. I have a life that is comfortable for me. I could give more, but I choose to, I think, dedicate a pretty significant portion of my resources. So all of the money I win from video games goes to charity. I donate an additional 10% of my salary to charity. And at this point, I work for an organization called Open Philanthropy, which is basically a foundation which a co-founder of Facebook, Dustin Moskovitz, decided to give away all of his money during his lifetime, and he found a bunch of people who were of the effective altruist mindset to help him do this. And so Open Philanthropy makes lots of grants, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of grants every year to charities and projects around the world in a bunch of different areas that could be very good for making life better for others. So this ranges from distributing vaccines in developing countries to passing laws that make it harder to abuse farm animals, to funding like biomedical research, to trying to pass laws that are better in certain ways for people in a variety of like states and countries, just kind of all over the place.
That's interesting. And am I correct in saying that's sort of the more like research type experimental arm of the movement, so to speak?
To some extent. I mean, Open Phil spends on a lot of different things. Some of them, that's one of the tough questions you have to ask if you're trying to make life better, is like, how much risk am I willing to take? Because in theory, you could say, all right, I'm willing to take a 1% chance of saving 10,000 lives over saving 50 lives for sure, because expected value is all that matters. On the other hand, you might say to yourself, I don't want to risk having no impact whatsoever by doing something really risky. I want to have a really sure thing where I'm just like definitely helping at least some people. And so there are charities that are like really good at, providing basic healthcare, which we know works 100% of the time. And there's stuff like research, where you fund research, you're never sure what you're going to get. Maybe they're going to come up with this great new medication. Maybe it's going to turn out that the clinical trials don't work and the medication is, back to the drawing board. And everybody kind of has their own preferences around that, and there's not really any one right answer to that question. I will say, I guess one other thing that really motivated me to pursue this was not just the basic fact of, okay, I have enough, I can give to others. There was a movie I saw, which I will recommend to people who are listening to this podcast. I recommend it to basically everyone in my life. It's called Life in a Day. It was made in, I think, 2011 by YouTube. And it's effectively a documentary where thousands of people around the world submitted video footage they had taken of themselves just kind of living out their lives on a certain day in July. And it's a documentary about life on Earth that just takes footage from all of this and kind of combines it all together to present this picture of what life on Earth is like. And I happened to see this movie when it was in theaters, and it just kind of blew me away and changed my life forever, because suddenly for the first time, I had this extremely strong visual of, wow, no matter what I'm doing, like no matter how deep I am into my own, stuff, there are like 7.5 billion people out there who are just as deep into their own stuff. When I'm asleep, billions of people are awake and doing their thing. When I'm, eating breakfast, there are hundreds of millions of people out there who are eating breakfast. Stuff like that. And it just really made it feel like, oh my goodness, there's all this life happening all the time. And there are 7.5 billion other people in the world, and all of their lives are as real as my life is. Like, they feel about themselves exactly the same way I feel about myself. They care about their lives the same way I care about my life. And it's suddenly like, oh, so if I can, help someone else not get sick, it's as though I dodged like a bullet and didn't get sick myself. If I can save someone else's life, it's like I've saved my own life. And it just made, I think, the idea of giving and trying to work on others' behalf feel much more meaningful to be like, wow, every other person out there really is a unique individual with their own brain that's operating 24 hours a day, which may feel like a really silly insight. It seems obvious when I put it that way, but there's a real difference between knowing it intellectually and really feeling it. And that movie made me feel it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes, and I think I'll probably have to watch it as well. I don't think I've seen that one.
Thanks. I've made a lot of people watch it in my time. I'm trying to keep it alive. Don't watch the sequel, though. Life in a Day 2, way worse than Life in a Day 1. Largely because it was filmed during COVID, and so half of it's just people sitting inside their houses being sad. Not as inspiring.
Yeah, 2020, I guess, is a rough, or 2021, rough time to make a movie.
They really tried to do the decade anniversary, and it didn't work out so well.
Yeah, I think all that stuff you said, I certainly agree that that's a big part of why I'm interested in effective altruism. I think for me, honestly, it was sort of just seeing the math as well. You and I both live in the United States. I think probably most of our listeners live in the US or other, fairly well-off countries. And just seeing that the things that we take for granted, that the sort of cheap medical interventions that are available are, to us, the low-hanging fruit, if you will, are not available to other people. And it's really, really efficient to help other people in that way, especially if you're using some of the sort of science and statistical tools that we have to know that it's actually working.
Yeah, the numbers are kind of unreal. It's one of those things that's, if you are an American and you haven't traveled abroad to a country where people are really poor, it can be kind of hard to internalize that, yeah, there are places where the average person just has 1/50th the income and wealth that the average American does. And that means that money to them goes much, much further, a little bit of extra money. There's a charity called Give Directly that just makes cash payments to people. And for $300 to $500, they can basically, in some of the poorest parts of the world, double someone's income for a year, which is kind of the equivalent in terms of what that person gets to experience that they would have been able to experience otherwise. It's the equivalent of giving someone in America $30,000 or $50,000. But of course, money costs the same everywhere. And so if you can help, you really want to focus on helping people abroad. Or, if it's preventing a pandemic, you're helping all people everywhere, hopefully.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. I guess I should ask, if we have listeners that are interested in learning more about effective altruism or maybe about some of those donation opportunities, do you have anywhere that you would point them?
Yeah, so I think effectivealtruism.org is a website that I was in charge of until pretty recently at my old job. That's a website where you can kind of read an introductory essay and get links to a lot of resources that can help. There's something called the EA Fellowship, which is basically an 8-week virtual class that you can kind of sit in and discuss a bunch of kind of papers and writings that are explain the core beliefs of the movement. That's something that I would recommend if somebody really wants to learn more. Although I think starting with that intro essay at effectivealtruism.org is good. You can also just check out givewell.org. They're a charity that they're a charity that researches and recommends other charities. They've done a ton of work to try and find, what are the most reliable ways to help people very cheaply that we know of, and what are the charities that are implementing those programs very efficiently and transparently and all of that. And this is just one, section of effective altruism. There are a lot of different causes people work on that aren't just healthcare all the time. But GiveWell's website is a great way to kind of explore wow, how deep does this go? How much research can you really do? How hard is it to answer these questions about what it means to do good?
Yeah, those are both awesome resources. I personally do donate to GiveWell's recommended charities, so that's certainly something I would recommend to folks as well. All right.
I see you have one last question on the list that you sent to me, and I'm curious how many of your readers are going to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, so I'll just give you the question without any preamble, and then we can maybe fill in some extra information. Verona, Lucy, or Avery?
Oh, gosh. I think in terms of who my personality resonates with the most, I'd say when I'm reading Avery's chapters, I feel yep, that's how I'd be approaching this. I just care a lot about everyone and want things to turn out okay, but I'm not even mad, I'm just disappointed kind of vibes. I think as far as like who my like favorite character is to read, regardless of whether I identify with them or not, it's Verona. But at the same time, as far as like the person who seems to have had like the most like overall compelling character arc or something, I feel like there's a lot to be said for Lucy as well. I mean, they all play a different role in the story, and I think they're all extremely interesting to read about. I don't know if I can just pick one.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question, which is one of the reasons I added it. So we should probably tell the listeners what we're talking about. I've asked you for a lot of elevator pitches already today.
I mean, I'm happy to pitch things. This is something I love pitching. So there's an author named Wildbow who writes original stories online. I think he's basically the best fiction author working today in any medium, and would highly recommend checking out some of his stories. The thing that I and most of his readers fell in love with was his first story. It's called Worm. It's a world where superpowers exist, but it's like incredibly realistically drawn, and it feels real in a way that like Marvel and DC just don't feel real to me. And explores kind of what it's like to have superpowers and sort of how people would actually use them. I'll stop there, I guess. And the story he's currently writing is a story called Pale, which is about three teenagers who are called upon by kind of the magical creatures living in their town to become witches and defend the town from threats in a world where magic is real. And there's this kind of constant, I guess, tension between magical creatures and the like witches and wizards that fight to bind them and enslave them and, you know, stop them from eating people. You know, some of it's good, some of it's bad. And so it's I don't know, you could call it the most like compelling version of Harry Potter ever written or something, I guess. That would be, it's sort of a weird comparison that way. What would you say about it?
Oh boy. Yeah, I agree with what you said. I would also maybe compare it to like Stranger Things in the sense that it's, you know, small town kids solving kind of horror-y mysteries, but of course they've got magic too.
Stranger Things is a good comparison, yeah. It's like a very good example of, you know, kids learning a new skill and putting it to use. It's sort of like the ultimate end game of all YA fiction anywhere. It's just, you know, done better in Pale than it's maybe ever been done. It is very long though. You gotta prepare yourself for like a million words if you're gonna sit down with Wildbow.
I think the way to think about it is as a book series. It's structured a little differently than a series because you have arcs, which are sort of like novellas, but if you think of it as I'm sitting down to read this series rather than I'm sitting down to read this book that's a million words long or more than that, then you're probably gonna have a better time.
Yeah, and, you know, prepare yourself to have every novella you're gonna get one or two like, oh my god, holy shit moments, which to me that's what fiction's all about, is delivering oh my god, holy shit moments. Am I allowed to curse on your podcast?
Yes, you are allowed to curse.
Yeah, no, fiction, I mean, I think somebody, I forget who said this, but it's like fiction is sort of the goal of a novel is just deliver as much cool stuff as possible, and I think Wildbow's novels deliver cool stuff at kind of an insane rate and quantity. Would recommend checking them out.
I don't know if I could give you a quite as eloquent a description. I would say the biggest strengths of his writing are world building in the sense of just creating these really interesting and detailed systems for magic or superheroics that just work very well. I think my favorite part of the magic in Pale is that once you become a magician, you can't lie. And if you ever break an oath, you get cursed forever and you lose all your magic. So that leads to a lot of really interesting plot developments.
And a lot of frank conversations, which is always nice.
Yeah.
Another way to put it, yeah, I think one of Wildbow's greatest strengths is like character. You might have been able to say this as well, but like character development. And, you know, the first novel he wrote, Worm, was he tried to write it like 10 different times from the perspective of 10 different characters before he finally settled on who the main character was actually going to be. And it absolutely feels that way. You really get a sense of, hey, all these characters have their own stuff going on. They're all like making decisions of their own that are not just informed by whatever the protagonist is doing. And every roughly once or twice every one of these novellas, he'll write a chapter from the perspective of a different character who may live, you know, halfway around the world from our protagonist, or might only have vaguely heard of them once. And you'll see like a completely different slice of this universe he's created than you would if you were just following the protagonist the whole time. You know, you've got a chapter from the perspective of a dog, a chapter from the perspective of a ghost, a chapter from the perspective of an eldritch being that thinks in a way that's completely different from the way humans think. It's just like lends a kind of depth to the world that's really hard to get if you're just sitting with one person the whole time.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. I discovered Wildbow, mid-pandemic, which was a really good time because you do kind of get sucked into reading them. But too soon to tell, but he might be my favorite author.
You'll get there. I got there too. Worm is my favorite novel and also my wife's favorite novel, and we have very different tastes in books aside from that. So it's it's not everyone's cup of tea. I met people who read it and didn't like it, or just, you know, could not read something that long for the life of them. But if you enjoy genre fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, superhero stuff, you absolutely owe it to yourself to give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll certainly endorse that as well. All right. I think that brings us to the end of things and also the end of our recording time. Erin, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you, getting your perspective on the game and also on some mostly unrelated topics that I just was also interested to hear you talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully our listeners will be as well. Where can people find you?
If you want to watch me play Storybook Brawl, you can check out my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Erin Gertler. I stream a mix of Magic and Storybook Brawl. A lot of my Storybook Brawl streaming happens around tournaments, but you can just follow the stream and check in once in a while and see if I've left any recordings lately. I do record all my streams and make them available for anyone to watch. So that's it. I don't really write about Storybook Brawl anywhere, but I do stream it. And if you want to learn about effective altruism and kind of are interested in figuring out how you can make more of a difference with your own life and help other people, I'm always happy to answer questions about that. You're welcome to just email me, erinlgertler@gmail.com. L as in lion, and just always happy to chat about that stuff because I've been thinking about it for a long time, and it sort of has been my job to talk about it for the last few years now, and I'm always happy to help people kind of explore that space.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you're a Magic player, I would also recommend checking out Erin's stream. He does great limited and constructed stuff.
Yeah, as soon as the new set, as soon as Streets of New Cabana comes out, I will be streaming quite a bit of Magic as I get into that format.
Looking forward to it. All right. Well, I'll give my standard podcast outro here as well. Thanks as always for listening, everybody. If you'd like to get involved with the podcast community, submit questions to be answered on air, or just give me feedback on the show, you can do so via our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. It's a great community full of folks that are dedicated to improving the game. We also have a Twitter account that you can follow at Book of Heroes SBB, and you can email us at bookofheroessbb@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next week.